York, and it was about one day after we met Venerable Robina for the first time ever, and probably about 6 months until before Dharma reached our ears at all for the first time. And on the second occasion, Venerable Robina looked at us and said, "You people look kind of reasonable, so why don't you just start a study group in Zurich?" And we were
saying that. It must have, I mean, maybe the Buddhas just used my mouth or something. I don't know.
It's very vivid in my memory, Venerable. So I think you really said it. And you know, this is how Laksam started. So this was the reason why we ended up starting the group about 4 years ago now, I think. And this is also the reason why we have this opportunity tonight, all together, for some today, for some tonight. I think we're here from many different continents and many different locations. That was the main cause, because everything depends on cause. Every effect has its cause. That was the main cause why we are here tonight together. There are many others, of course. And one of the most important one is Venerable Robina agreeing to be here. And we are really very grateful, because Venerable Robina, for those who don't know her yet, she is not a typical nun, what you would think about somebody sitting in the cave and you know, in a solitary retreat for 20 years or something like this. I think Venerable Robina is more like a nuclear power plant of FPMT. So she is quick, she is very powerful, and she can put the energy into us to do things that we maybe would have never done before, like start a study group before we even knew anything about Dharma. Now, today's topic is important one. I think we're all anxious, not just because the election. It so happens that the second wave of the pandemic is about to start, and some of us are living in countries which already went to a full lockdown or about to go to full lockdown. So even more, we need some power, Venerable Robina. We need some courage. So yes, please,
exactly, we do.
And also, I think we need some push for our minds to think about what's really important in life and what isn't. And that, I think, for that, the topic 8 Worldly Dharmas is a very, very suitable one. And we are very excited, very grateful that you take your time to teach us on such a anxious day.
I understand. I know, I understand.
Thank you very much for everybody who has joined. I think we're all busy people, and for taking the time to join us tonight. We are very excited and grateful also for your participation. If there are any questions to us, please write them in the chat. Talia is also—
Put your hand up. It's okay. Put your hand up if it suddenly comes to you.
And then you can also put your hand up, of course, and we will for sure have the opportunity to share it too. And then, Venerable, we wanted to also offer a short mandala, but also wanted to request that you share your beautiful voice and sing it for us.
Okay, well, what this is really the center, Laksam, offering a mandala, and a mandala really is just, it's referring to all the objects of our universe. So of course, if we know Buddhist cosmology, we're going to have, you know, we mightn't have learned this in school, but we've got a blue sky. Guess what? Because it's reflecting off lapis lazuli. Who had ever heard of that before? We've got, and this Buddhist cosmology describes all sorts of unusual, you know, contents of the universe. But if we don't know that one, we just use our creative imagination, think of all the most marvelous things that make people happy in the world, and we pile them all up and make an offering. We make an offering to the Buddha as a request for the teachings from the Buddha. Even though you're going to get it from a peanut like me, you know, if I'm keeping my practice fairly reasonable, we hope that the Buddha comes through to me and comes through to you. This is the way it works. You know, I always remember one time Lama Zopa Rinpoche saying, I mean, he was the one who told me to teach back in 1987, and I was completely sort of shocked. I thought, what do I know, for God's sake? But he said I should do it, so I tried to do it. And so I remember when he told me one time, in a teaching, he said, the main benefit from a person's words is not their knowledge, but is their pure, if they practice properly and keep their commitments and keep their vows. So I figured that's my job. And then hopefully if I open my mouth and I've done a bit of study, the Buddha's words will come through, you know, and will bless us all. So we offer to the Buddha this marvelous mandala, these words we're going to say here. this ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with, I'll sing it in Tibetan, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. That's the Buddhist view of the universe. I imagine this is a Buddha field and offer it. And then may all living beings enjoy this pure land. So we're going to offer that from our hearts as a request for the teaching. We know ourselves, if you go visit somebody, you don't go empty-handed, you know, you bring something, you give. So there's a really auspicious meaning. And we're thinking, even though I'm singing it, we're offering it on behalf of the students and of the center to the Buddha. That includes me. Saji perki jogshing metog tramri rablingji ni de genpadi sange jingdu mikte ulwagi droken namjag jingla chepashog. And now we imagine Buddha happily receiving our offering. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. Okay. So now, just fix something. Hang on. Okay. So now we do this other little prayer. And this is the one above. Yeah, that's it. No. Keep going. That's it. That's okay, so it should be slightly different. If you've got the one you do before, see the third line where it says, by my practice of giving and the other perfections. When we do it before teachings, there's another version that says, by this action of listening to the teachings. So the Tibetan will say, Dagi Jinsog is this other one, but we should say Dagi Che Nien, by the benefit of listening to the teachings. That's the prayer we should say before the teaching. So we'll do that one now. And this has got 2 parts to it. The first part is for those of us who already identify with being a Buddhist. So we reiterate our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. The second 2 lines are stating our purpose. The Lamas would say stating our motivation, our purpose. Why are we here together? To listen to these teachings so we can take some tools from it, so we can develop our incredible potential, so we can be a benefit to others, all the way to leading them to enlightenment, as the prayer says, you know. Sangye charang soke chognam la jangcho badu dagni kyapsuchi dagi, and this is different, chernyen gipa sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok sangye charang soke chognam la jangcho badu dagni kyapsuchi dagi chernyen gipa sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok sangye charang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyapsuchi dagi chernyen gipa sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok. Okay. That's it for the prayers. That's it. Good. So I'll just do one more thing. Hang on. All right. Oh. Wait a minute. I have to do one more thing. I'm so sorry. Okay, away we go. All right. So I know when I first heard the teachings and you hear this weird phrase, the 8 worldly dharmas. I mean, who knows or who cares? You know, when you first hear it, it's just this really abstract phrase. Now, I don't know whether it came out of Tibet over the last 1,200 years or if we can track it back to India. I mean, I'm not a scholar and I haven't studied enough to know, but it was no interest to me. Even when I heard the meaning, it just sounded kind of boring, you know. So then when we start to listen to the teachings, and of course, this packaging of the teachings that is the expertise of the Tibetans, I tell you, and it comes from, and this is the Lam Rim. Just to give a bit of background to that, because I'll show where the 8 worldly dharmas fits into that. So Atisha, this amazing Indian yogi scholar saint who'd spent many years with his guru Selingpa in Indonesia, Sumatra, just up from Java, you know, Vajrayana Buddhism flourished there. This is back in 10th century, something. So he spent years there with his teacher. Then he went, I forget the evolution of it, back to India. And then he was invited to Tibet, and he spent the last 15, 17 years or something in Tibet. And I think Dharma had been there a couple of 100 years, since about the 8th century, I suppose, when Guru Rinpoche went there, Padmasambhava. So Dharma was flourishing, really flourishing. Vajrayana Buddhism, this amazing, outrageous, sort of like the culmination and the most esoteric expression of all of Buddha's teachings. So we can see that the Dharma was there, but I mean, that's my words for it. They kind of, I think he thought they'd lost the plot a little bit. There was no real coherent overview where everything fit, something like that. So he wrote this simple little text, deceptively simple, that's called The Light That Guides You on the Way. And basically what he did is he took all the essence of this vast body of knowledge. And I think sometimes we just forget where Buddhism comes from. It's evolution. You know, as the Dalai Lama said, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago. They're the evolution of all this information. And they're the ones who first began the investigation into the nature of self. I mean, you know, we smarty pants Europeans probably thought it was Freud. This is 3,000 years or more. These genius Indians, and Buddha came out of that amazing tradition. Anyway, what Atisha did was, he took the essence from all the etymology, the psychology, the epistemology, the philosophy, the metaphysics of Buddhism, this vast body of knowledge. You know, this vast, already then, this, I mean, up at the 10th, 11th century, this vast body of knowledge that had been floating around for 2,000 years, nearly by then, more. And he put it in a very orderly way. He presented it seemingly simply and in an orderly way. So orderly, according to what? Well, we know perfectly well, when we study any body of knowledge, whether it's cooking all the way to physics, you don't just leap in any way you feel like it and cross your fingers and hope for the best. You have this nice package of orderly teachings, and you know that these brilliant these thinkers, these cooks have put together. So people like you and me who are beginning at it can start in the beginning, and I like to call that junior school. Well, you know what, in the Lam Rim, as we know perfectly well, as Lama Tsongkhapa calls it, because he was the 14th century Lama who used Atisha's text as his basis for his major commentaries on the Lam Rim. So Lam Rim means path gradual, path graded. Like, you know, what? Excuse me? We can hear not so well, you know. But but if we use the word course, the English word course, suddenly we get the meaning. We know a course in music or math, whether it's a 10-year or a 1-year course. You begin at the beginning. And so as Lama Zopa, who respects the lineage, would respectfully translate the term that's used for the first stages of practice. It's the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability. Well, we know in the text it's called the teachings of the summary of the least of the least scope, the low scope of teachings. Well, you know, that's abstract. I mean, in my culture in Australia, we call that junior school. And you go, oh, I get it. We get it immediately. It's a cliche. It's simple, but it really helps us. Then, of course, you go to high school, don't you? And that's called the middle scope. And as Lama Zopa would call it, the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the middle capability. And that's the wisdom wing. This lovely analogy, a bird needs 2 wings, wisdom and compassion. And that's the Hinayana component of the path. And if you graduated there, you would realize emptiness and you'd get out of samsara. You say, goodbye, I'm out of here, you're done. But if you're on the Mahayana path, you'd go to the compassion wing, which is university. That's the great scope. The teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the greatest capability. And then, of course, if you're on the Mahayana path, particularly in the Tibetan Buddhist, because the only area, only now, where all the teachings of Buddhas from the junior school, high school, university, and then postgraduate, which is Tantra, that's the only place where that is extant, or the only, you know, is in Tibetan Buddhist teachings. So here we have the Lam Rim. This is all of it from A to Z. All the teachings, all the essence of it that Atisha took, and then Tsongkhapa uses his basis for his commentary on his Lam Rim. So this is the basis of our discussion here. And it's so crucial. Any teaching we hear, just like in math, if you're studying math and you open, or maths, as we say, in whatever, but if you opened a book randomly, a math textbook, and you just opened up any page, you would know where you were at. You'd say, oh, that's way too advanced. Oh, I know that already. So you'd know where you belong. You know where that teaching belongs. This is a really crucial point, and the Lamas say this, you know. So if you open up any book of teaching, any book on the bookshelf of all the thousands of Buddhist teachings, and you randomly opened a page, if you understand this packaging called the Lam Rim, you would identify immediately, oh, that's junior school, that's high school, that's university, that's postgraduate. And if there's any teaching in that math book that doesn't fit in that structure, then clearly it's not maths. It has to fit in. It's obvious. If there's any recipe in a book that doesn't fit in the stages of development of a cook, then it's clearly not cooking, you know. It's clear. It's a very interesting point. We don't think of spiritual teachings like that. That's our problem. So that's what the Lam Rim is. And so 8 Worldly Dharmas, basically what it is a presentation of 8 different ways that we're driven by attachment. So now in high school, we learn in depth about attachment on the wisdom wing and the Hinayana level. We learn hugely about attachment. Before even attachment, we learn first about how to control the servants of attachment, or indeed, as Lama Zopa will say, the slaves of attachment. And the slaves of the delusions are the body and speech. So junior school entry level grade 1 practice in Buddhism is you abide by the laws of karma. And what does that mean? That means you don't harm others. Why not? Because Buddha says everything we think and do and say leaves seeds in our mind that will ripen as our future experiences. We're our own creator. His Holiness the Dalai Lama calls karma self-creation. So junior school, you learn all about karma. Before you go any further, if you don't understand this, you don't have the whole view in Buddhism. These days in the world, people do mindfulness and they can be a 1% Buddhist, and you're allowed to be. You can do what you like, but you can't understand the whole Buddhist view. Many people don't like the view of karma. They feel embarrassed about it, you know, to think that you could be a dog or something. We think that's so silly. But without understanding karma, it's the worldview, it's Buddha's worldview, it's Buddha's observation of the whole universe. So karma, the simplest level is that you learn to control your body and speech. Why? Because what you do and think and say sows seeds in your mind that'll produce the future person you become. You know, we are our own creators. So this is the very first level of practice. You zip your lip and keep your hands to yourself and mind your own business and leave sentient beings in peace. Don't harm them. First level. Next level, you now subdued your mind and body, the body and speech enough to get to the next level. Now you can start becoming your own therapist. This is Lama Yeshe, is paraphrasing Lama, you know, and it's profound. This is where you become a Buddhist. This is where you become a Buddhist. In the first stages, abiding by the, you know, the laws of karma, being a good person, communists share that. Buddhists share that. Christians share that. The nice Muslim shares that. Any good person controls their body and speech and doesn't harm others. That's universal. But when you get to specifically to Buddha's view, and the point is, without understanding this in high school, you cannot begin to understand the 8 worldly dharmas, which is actually usually taught in the bodhisattva path, because it's a more pervasive way, a more fundamental, primordial way that attachment works. It seems so cute, the 8 worldly dharmas, the 8 worldly concerns. It's hard to hear it in the beginning until you begin to unpack and unravel your own mind, which is what you do in the middle scope, which is what you do in high school. And you can only do that if you've begun to control your body and speech. Now, 99% of us haven't even begun to control our body and speech yet. Look how hard it is in your nice relationship with your nice husband, who's not a rapist, who's not a terrorist, but you can't control your mouth, can you? You have to say those words. You can't control your mouth with that mean person on the bus. So we can't even control our body and speech yet. We haven't even begun to really harness our body and speech. We haven't even begun to do junior school properly. So as long as we know that, we can be very humble with ourselves. So we've got to control the body and speech first, junior school. Then we begin to really do the work of being a Buddhist. And that means we have to learn the Buddhist model of the mind. So to begin to understand the 8 worldly dharmas, we have to just do a bit of middle scope work. We have to understand the Buddha's view of the mind, which is so unique and precise it's so precise and so unique to the Buddha. The words, the contents of our mind, attachment, anger, love, jealousy, depression, anxiety, we know these. But if we study psychology in our culture, we don't study things like that. That sounds too silly. You know, we study complicated things like ADID and DDHD and OCD and bipolar and Lord knows what. I'm not being sarcastic. Buddha's view hasn't changed in 2,500 years, not because he's stubborn, but because it seems to work. So we need to know Buddhist psychology, and most of us don't. We don't study it. You know, we say all the words fairly simply, but we don't really see the difference. And why this is so important, I tell you, the end result of being a Buddhist, the end result is to become a Buddha. That's where you graduate. You graduate as a Buddha. So the etymology of that word tells us everything. It's so simple. Bud, or the Tibetan equivalent for the word Buddha, Sangye, this first syllable, Sang, Bud, implies the utter eradication from our being, from our mind, from our consciousness. Mind and consciousness in Buddhism are used synonymously, broadly speaking. The utter eradication, that word, that syllable implies the utter eradication from our being, our mind, of all fear, all ego, all neurosis, all depression, anxiety, you know, hate, aversion, jealousy, despair, panic, anxiety, low self-esteem, attachment, you name it. Buddha, and this is beyond insane. This is not that's why we think it's religion. Oh, that's ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous. That's impossible. When we first hear this, I remember one woman in a class, and this is normal, we're all like this, she literally laughed and said, that's demented. You'd be an insane person if you didn't have anger, depression, jealousy, fear, blah, blah. And that's, of course, how we think now. Why? Because we give it status as being a real, solid, intrinsic component of a normal person. So normal that we assume you'd be abnormal if you didn't have it, you know. This is how primordially we assume that those parts of us are proper parts of a proper person, hopefully not too extreme. Then not only that, Buddha says that we can get rid of this rubbish. And that, you know, that's the wisdom, if you like it, that's the wisdom wing. You could say it like that. The nuts and bolts of Buddha's practice, Buddha's understanding of karma, the world, how suffering happens, how happiness happens, and then the detailed description and understanding of our own mind, the cognitive process itself. That's really high school, junior school and high school work. So then, not only can we do that, not only can we rid the mind of all the nonsense, and again, why should we? Well, because Buddha's view is, guess what, honeys, that's the main cause of your suffering. Big surprise, we thought it was the boyfriend. No, this is the mind, and that's the work we have to do in high school. So then, not only can we eradicate that from our mind, and don't hold your breath, by the way, it'll be a few lifetimes, but it's possible. This is what Buddha's found. And this is not belief. He didn't get this from revelation. It's not coming from on high. It's not speculation. He's not crossing his fingers and hoping for the best. This is the direct result of his own direct experience. He's like, you know, he's like a scientist. He's found this to be true. And he presents his methodology and he says, over to you, baby. If you want to do this, here's how I did it. Then not only can we do that, if we're on the Mahayana path, we can also, this is a second syllable, the etymology of the second syllable, da, gye, is that we can develop to perfection everything else in our mind, which are at the core of our being: love, compassion, wisdom, intelligence, joy, self-confidence, the positive ones. It seems almost too simple for us, and it seems even simplistic to have this model, you know, but this is the way Buddha talks. So we don't get this, even theoretically. We can't hear that that's the goal, that's the result of all the hard work. If we can't get that, then we don't understand Buddhist psychology. We don't understand why you're being a Buddhist. We just don't get it, you know. So it's so simple, it's embarrassing. The end result, that's how you'd be. Okay, to hear how a Buddha would be sounds like science fiction. But this is the meaning of that word. So then obviously, if we can get rid of the delusions and grow the goodness, it's clear that all of Buddha's methodology it implies the methodology. And that means this begins in high school. This really begins in high school, where you start to learn first the Buddhist model of the mind. And then you, as we hear, and we're going to go into this today, you know, is that we learn the contents of this consciousness of ours, the contents. And Buddha divides all the contents of this mind of ours, the thousands upon thousands of thoughts and feelings and emotions and unconscious and subconscious, all this seeming chaos. He divides all these contents simply into three categories. That's it. Those that are neurotic, deluded, I-based, fear-based, disturbing, distorted, delusional, demented, ridiculous, insane states of mind that we think are normal. Buddha says we should be weeping with compassion first for ourselves. And that's what we begin to get in high school. And this whole first high school and junior school, the wisdom wing, has got nothing to do with compassion yet. This has got to do with compassion for yourself. And we miss this hugely in our culture. We leap off to, oh, it's all about compassion. Oh, I've got to help others. What do you mean I'm suffering? No, I'm not suffering. Look at all those suffering people out there. Buddha says you've missed the point. In the wisdom wing, we've got to get dead deep. We've got to unpack and unravel the chaos in here to begin to recognize first and foremost that this is like a nightmare. This is why we suffer, and we have to be vomiting at the thought of suffering. That's what they mean by renunciation. So the culmination of wisdom wing in the Mahayana path, because you don't complete the wisdom wing here, you get renunciation. And what are you renouncing? What are you giving up? You've got to give up suffering and its causes. This is the job of the first and second scopes. And if you've got even some semblance of renunciation, how do you think you'd be? Well, guess what you would have done? In junior school, you would have learned to control your body and speech, the slaves of your delusions. You stop killing and stealing and lying and putting too many pieces of cake in your mouth and jumping on too many boys or whatever it is you jump on. You would have harnessed the energy of your body and speech in a most sophisticated way. Even that alone would cause you to become a much more stable, useful person. Then you're qualified to get to high school and really do the work to unpack and unravel your own mind on the basis of learning super clearly Buddha's model of the mind, which means the first, you learn to recognize the neuroses, the delusions, the first lot. The second lot are the virtues, the ones that you can grow to perfection, the ones that are at the core of our being. The first lot are not integral to who we are, Buddha says. Psychologically, this is a shocking concept in modern psychology and modern neuroscience. There is no equivalent view. But what's fascinating, these last 30, 40 years, as we know, His Holiness, has been amazing in bringing the Buddhist knowledge, the knowledge from India, to our culture. And now, because people admire him so hugely, and they see he's such a brilliant scholar, an amazing being, amazing person, that now we're learning hugely in our culture. These amazing conferences, Mind and Life, this organization, you see their website, mindandlife.org. The last 30, 40 years organizing these conferences with the Dalai Lama and and all the best brains in Tibetan Buddhism, discussing with all the best brains in our modern culture. Finally, after 30, 40, 50 years of Buddhism being around, we're beginning to really pay attention to it. The thinkers, the intelligent ones in our culture. Initially, it's just got a religion. Who pays attention to religion? Nobody, That's lowest on the totem pole of thinking, isn't it? We know that. But with the Dalai Lama, people admire and can see. So there's so much now, people looking into the mind, what the mind is, what is consciousness, how does it function? It's amazing what's happening now. And we're knowing now with neuroplasticity, for example. I remember one Canadian scientist, I think, saying it was the greatest finding of the 20th century. And of course, it was it was the Dalai Lama and all that mob spearheading this kind of thinking by even just putting, wiring up the brains of meditators, not doing anything fancy, just thinking about compassion. They observe that now that reconfigures the brain. So that gives us real confidence in our culture. It's proving what Buddha's been telling us for 2,500 years, that guess what, honey? You're not stuck with the mind you're born with. You can change your mind. All that's marvelous now, but we need to study the Buddhist model. You see, one of the problems I think in our culture, we conflate liking Buddhism with knowing Buddhism. That's a big mistake. Liking it is fine. It hooks you to get you into it, but it won't continue if you don't study it and put it into your mind properly and learn it in detail, I mean, it's like how absurd to conflate liking gardens with knowing how to be a gardener. Or liking, or you're thinking, I have faith in mathematics. Yeah, mathematics works. People have proved it. But what if your mother tells you to go and buy 5 oranges and you've never bothered to learn mathematics? You'll be in trouble. You've got to know it. So knowing it is one thing. Liking is a good start, but then you've got to then start unpacking and unraveling it and knowing the theories, knowing the concepts. Because one way of putting what being a Buddhist is, you're simply learning to think like a Buddha until eventually it becomes real for you. So you have to know it, you have to study it. So just to say, oh yeah, I believe in karma. It's like saying I believe in mathematics. What good is it? Oh, I believe in botany. I'm very happy for you. But you don't know it, you're useless. So you have to do it and learn it if you choose. No one's forcing you to be a Buddhist, So we need to learn these things. We need to learn unpack and unravel, learn the nuts and bolts. So we have to learn Buddhist psychology. So there's a bare bones text that's always studied in the monasteries. And if you read it, it sounds so arcane. It's called Low Rig, Mind and Awareness. And it lays out the nuts and bolts of this model of the mind. First, the epistemological model, the way the mind functions, which I tell you is so fascinating. Modern scientists would be blissed out to study it. But the biggest stumbling block is they've got to realize they're not studying the brain here. They're studying the actual subjective cognitive process itself, which is what the mind is, So then you learn the psychological model, the contents of the mind. So let's just look at this a little bit, because we begin to look into eight-worldly dharmas, which is expressed and really practiced in the highest stages of the bodhisattva path, in that whole genre of practices called transforming problems into happiness. But this is too abstract for us if we haven't done some earlier work. I mean, transforming problems into happiness, which is part of the teachings that's called exchanging self for others, which is all part of the teachings, the methods that get you to achieve bodhicitta, the more radical approach to achieve bodhicitta. And bodhicitta is this outrageous paradigm shift that we make in our mind to the point where now others, only others, are more important than self. So as Pavanka Rinpoche said, you need to be a suitable vessel to even hear these teachings properly, to even hear these techniques properly, Because, and what does a suitable vessel mean? Well, you've got to be a suitable vessel to study physics, to study university level physics. You've got to do junior school first and learn 1 + 1 is 2, and then go to high school, then go to university. It's sort of obvious, but we forget that. We give equal status to all the Buddhist teachings. Oh, I love this transforming problems teaching. Love your enemy. Oh, sounds wonderful. Then your hubby just, you know, he burps and you get angry with him. Okay, you're not a suitable vessel yet. I mean, it's like we've got to know that this is stages of practice. We have to know this, not to make it forbidding to us, but we have to know where all the teachings fit. So equally Dharmas, you'll hear in the Lam Rim commentaries, you'll hear Lama Zopa talk about it at the simplest level, but he's referring that teaching is taught in the framework of transforming problems, which is in the framework of the more radical approaches to get bodhicitta, which is the university level of the teachings. So we have to know that. Then we understand if we're ready for it. And we have to be intelligent about it. We're not used to thinking this way, but it's extremely important, I tell you. So if you want to know the 8 different ways that attachment works and pervades our mind at that level, you'd better know what attachment is. And where do you learn about that? High school. So let's look into it. Let's go back to high school, okay? So the Buddha's telling us, like the word is indicating, Buddha, that there are some states of mind that are the neurotic, deluded, fear-based, I-based, and the main source of our suffering. That's it. The main source of all suffering, of all sentient beings in the universe since beginning of time. This is his analysis, you know. And then there are states of mind, the second category, the virtuous, positive, productive, useful, beneficial ones that are intrinsic to us, are in the core of our being and can be developed to perfection. Almost too simple to hear it, but this is profound if we can begin to hear it. So it's therefore clear that if this is the case, I need to learn to distinguish between the neuroses and the virtues, the negative ones and the positive ones, because these are just simple terms for them. I need to learn. It's clear. So then we start to look at our mind and we know it's chaos all the time, even if we're nice people. We're not terrorists and maniacs and, you know, necessarily running around murdering and killing too many people. We might, you know, we're just nice people if we compare in the world. We're fairly nice people who want to be nice people. But we look into our mind and we can see it's chaos. And the more we look into our mind, the more we believe we're getting worse. We're not. We're just seeing it. But this is what we consider as the default as normal. Everybody has a disturbed mind. Everybody has a crazy mind. Everybody has uncontrolled thoughts. That's how we think in our culture. And with respect to our culture and our views of neuroscience and psychology, we don't have methods. We do not have methods for subduing, except with a pill. These days, more and more with marvelous therapists, we're learning, like, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy. That's the closest you're going to get to Buddha's view, I tell you. He's a cognitive therapist. Buddha's a genius. He's your best cognitive therapist. By changing your thoughts, you change your behavior. Like, duh, you know? So there's wonderful things in the West now, wonderful ideas. But I have to say, with respect to Buddha, you know, as if I know everything, I don't. But this is his expertise. The mind is Buddhist expertise. There is no question. And the level, the subtlety to which we can learn about the mind is beyond imagination, you know. And the qualities we would cultivate if we start to, let's say, get single-pointed concentration. Lama Yeshe talks about this in his Mahamudra, this marvelous book of lamas that came out the year before. I can't remember when it came out, recently. Lama, you know, he loves to get us excited and enthusiastic. So in one chapter, he talks a little about the amazing qualities we would accomplish if we just achieve single point of concentration, which is this genius method that Buddha got when he diverged in his own direction from the Hindus, and which the Hindus invented. Like as His Holiness said, it was more than 3,000 years ago that they're the ones who first began the investigation into the nature of self, and it was on the basis of this brilliant skill called single point of concentration, which is extant and living right now. People looking like you and me in the mountains, metaphorically or actually achieving single point of concentration. So normally in the text they give you the technical description of the stages. There's 9 stages of it. Well, Lama, getting us excited, he tells us how you'd be if you'd accomplish this. The Buddha would say we've had single point of concentration, samadhi, in countless lifetimes. We've lost it. And you can't even, he said, as Lama says, it's unimaginable, almost like impossible to believe what the potential of our mind if we just get some single point of concentration. 99% of us won't get it in this life because you've got to give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll and become a monk or nun and go to the mountains. You know, most of us won't do that, which doesn't mean we can't use it and learn it. We will, we can, and we'll discuss it. But just to hear the clarity, the brilliance, the sharpness, the joy that is just the natural potential of our minds that we can accomplish with single point of concentration. It's right there. The techniques are there for anybody, you know. It's incredibly inspiring more than anything. So learning to know about the mind. So the reason we need single point of concentration is so we can do the job of discriminating between the craziness and the goodness, which is like a big soup of emotion right now. So our job then is to learn to know the difference. But like anything, you first have to learn the theories. So let's look at what are the characteristics of a so-called neurotic, negative, deluded state of mind, and what are the characteristics of a so-called virtuous, positive, beneficial state of mind, because they're uniquely, precisely, and totally different. But for us, they're mixed together like a big soup, and we can't tell one bit from another until it comes out as screaming emotion, you know? So there's a third category of states of mind in this packaging of the mind for the Buddha, the contents of our mental consciousness, and there's no fourth category. And these are known, they're sort of called neutral, meaning not negative and not positive, which sounds abstract to us, but what that means is I like to call these the mechanics of our mind. And they're the parts of the mind that whether you're a murderer or a meditator, we all need these to function properly. You know, to be, so they're called concentration, good memory, which is the real meaning of the word mindfulness. Discrimination, there's many of these that are not virtuous in their character and not non-virtuous in their character, but they're crucial states of mind. If you want to function properly, you need these, as I said, with your, you know, as Lama Zopa says, because mindfulness, which we put lots of meaning onto, is just another better, what it is the ability to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. That's called mindfulness. It just really means like good memory, short-term memory, without breaking it. So as Lama Zopa says, thieves need mindfulness, you know? So we've got to see this difference. There's the negative, neurotic, deluded ones, which the Buddha has found we can get rid of. Why? Because they cause us suffering and make us crazy and make us harm others. 2, the virtuous, positive, useful ones. Why can we can grow those to perfection? How marvelous, because they cause us happiness and cause us to help others. And we've got to hone and grow the third lot so we can use them wisely to do the job of discriminating. This is the job of being a Buddhist from here to Buddhahood, to distinguish between the negative, neurotic ones and the positive, useful ones. So to do that, it's like if you go look in a garden and you decide, oh, I've got to learn mindfulness, you know, and I've got to look at the garden and be mindful of everything in the garden. You can get really good concentration if you did that. You could. And you could look at every single thing and you could even replicate it in a drawing because it's so clear in your mind, this mindfulness of everything in a garden. But what good is that on its own if you haven't got the intelligence to distinguish between a weed and a herb? You just become an idiot. And this is one of the biggest failings about understanding what mindfulness means. We just think it's learning to watch what's happening moment by moment, and there's this, and you know, that's enough. It's a step, it's a starting point, but you got to then imbue that mindfulness with intelligence by learning Buddha's botany. Oh, so now you see, well, wow, there's a deluded thought, there's angry thought, there's a virtuous thought, there's a kind thought, and we've got 1,000 thoughts a second. Even in the West, they say that. So this is a brilliant job we have to learn to do. And first, but you can't do this, remember, if you haven't been to junior school and controlled the slaves of your delusions, the body and speech. You got to control them first. Then you can control your mind. It's so logical and organic and incremental, you know. So that means we have to first learn the theory, we have to learn Buddha's botany. What is a weed? What is a herb? What is the character of a negative state of mind? And what is the character of a positive one? Now, these words sound pretty easy and they're not complicated, but it's complicated. We make it complicated because we are so addicted to not look at the thoughts themselves, but we look at the external events, things, people that we believe are the cause of these thoughts. And we're up a garden. You're not up a garden without a paddle. What are you? You're up a creek without a paddle. A load of rubbish. Not a possibility. But that's our psychology. That's how we are. We are obsessed with looking into the past for a needle in a haystack. Ha ha, there's the cause of my suffering. That's why I'm neurotic now. That's why I choose crummy boyfriends. That's why I'm going out of my brain with distress and anxiety. Because my mummy did this and my daddy did this and my brain is this and my chemicals are that and the weather is this. They play a role. Buddha does not argue. But he says we're giving them too much power. And this is why it is so hard to hear the Buddhist approach properly. It's really hard when your boyfriend looks at you ugly, or even your husband burps when he drinks his cup of tea, or he snores, or he farts in bed. Tiny baby events. He's not raping you. Just the mini little baby events, which becomes a trigger for that annoyance. that frustration, that jealousy, whatever it might be. We don't pay attention to this one. We don't want to know about this one. We keep looking at that one. This is our main problem. This is the major obstacle to our being Buddhists in the proper way. And it's hard. It's a difficult job. It's called high school, but it's like, you know, it's like postgraduate level. It's amazingly hard practice. Even controlling our body and speech is hard, believe me. So we have to learn to like reverse the energy of a bomb, and instead of paying attention to the action, the traffic, the person, the thing, the event, the past, the chemical, the brain, the this, the that, that is the trigger for what's going on in the actual mind itself. So that's why we need concentration. That's why we need to develop the habit to pay attention to the thought, the feeling, the emotion. And then on the basis, and that's what you want mindfulness for, that's it. But then you have to know the theory. You got to know, you know, you got to know the name of that state of mind. You got to know, is it a negative one? Is it a positive one? Is it a neutral one? You got to have intelligence. You imbue your mindfulness with intelligence. That means you've got to study the mind. It's very clear. We can all say the word attachment. We can all say the word anger, but our problem is, you know, we don't notice the jealousy until it's pouring out the mouth and you're shaking with pain and rage. We don't notice the anger until it's at that level, or we don't notice the depression until you're inert in bed, unable to move, because it's only, in other words, for us, the next major obstacle to our seeing our mind is that we don't pay attention to the thoughts and feelings and emotions until the body is involved. This is an incredibly powerful point. We only notice that we're feeling something when the body is shaking or when you're inert in bed with depression. You only, I mean, the commonest, this is an example, the commonest question I'll have, we'll all have it, you'll hear yourself, what do I do when I'm angry with my boyfriend? So what you're saying is, at that moment, you're screaming and shouting, what will I do? Well, that is as idiotic as asking me, Rabina, you're going 180 kilometers, I suppose, in Switzerland. Are you like the Germans? You go fast? Let's pretend you do. Have you got laws in Switzerland? You got laws? Like the Germans don't have laws of speed. Do you have speed laws in Switzerland?
Yes, 120 on highway.
Oh, how humble. We're only allowed to do about 100 in Australia. It's so boring. Anyway, in Germany, you're doing 180 k's an hour, okay, kilometers an hour. And let's say, this is how silly it is saying, and this sounds, I'm not being rude, but listen to it. It's like asking me, Rabina, what do I do when I'm angry with my boyfriend? That's like asking me, what do I do at 120 kilometers an hour and I notice my wheels are falling off? That is, we know that's an absurd question because it implies you've never heard of mechanics, you've never paid attention to your car until the wheels fall off. That's how we are now. Because we're so obsessed with the outside world. We're so obsessed with the boyfriend and the activities and the brain activity and the this one and the that one and what mummy did and what daddy did, the external events. We're so obsessed with those, we don't ever even look into our mind until the body is shaking. And that is the wheels falling off. It's the best analogy. So then, in other words, it's like you've never heard of mechanics. You've never known there's such a thing as mechanics. You've got a brand new car and it rides beautifully and you never pay any attention. When the wheels start wobbling, when the things start, you never pay attention. You never think about it until suddenly the wheels are falling off at 120 kilometers an hour. A bit late, I am sorry. But that's when most of us start to realize there's a problem. Why? Simply because we've got no techniques and we have no energy to want to look inside until it's too late. That's why most of us go crazy. If we were able to use the Buddhist skill, the simplest level, practical, of becoming conscious of what the hell is going on in our thoughts, like noticing when the wheels are wobbling. So I'm sitting at the kitchen sink and I notice annoyance arise when my husband burps. But no, you don't say anything, or you leave it there until one day you want to kill him. Then you go, oh, I must be angry. But you didn't notice it earlier because you don't notice the wobbles. We notice the violence when we're too extreme. And that's because we're addicted to our bodies. And it's only when the body expresses what we're feeling, because we're so addicted to our bodies. We think of emotions as being physical. I mean, that's like a joke. Emotions are mental. But because the body and mind are integrated and linked, we don't notice until the body expresses it. The body's like the tip of the iceberg. I really mean this. If we could learn If we can imagine, since we're children, becoming conscious of our mind, learning what the thoughts are, learning what anger is, distinguishing jealousy from love, from kindness, from anger, from jealousy, from depression, getting some ability to distinguish our thoughts and start to work on our thoughts before they become emotion. You can't imagine the happy person you'd become. You'd never lose control. This is fact. This is what we are capable of. But we're so addicted to the outside world as being the main causes of things, and we're so addicted to physical experiences. We are addicted to our bodies, you know, addicted. Most people even think of meditation as being a physical thing. It's like a joke. And so, in other words, emotions, what we mean by emotions is when the body's shaking. So the mind is what has emotion. Anger is not physical, it's mental. Attachment is not physical, it's mental. Jealousy is not physical, it's mental. But because the body and mind are utterly integrated, utterly affected by each other, then it's only when we notice the physical that we notice the thoughts and feelings. So the feelings. But the point the Buddha's making, which is what we have to learn to do, is to recognize that emotions are the tip of the iceberg, and that beneath the emotions, what informs the emotions literally are conceptual thoughts. So anger is a conceptual thought. Attachment is a conceptual thought. Ego grasping, the root delusion, is a conceptual thought. Low self-esteem is a conceptual thought. Love is a conceptual thought. Kindness is a conceptual thought. Thought is the fundamental starting point, but way deep down in our bones that we don't pay any attention to until it's screaming out the mouth and your body's shaking. That's so, one, because we pay attention to the outside, and two, we don't notice our mind until it becomes physical. These are the major stumbling blocks that prevent us from doing the job that Buddha says we can do. So it really takes time, but this is the job. So, okay, in the first lot of the neurotic states of mind, you know, it's a loose enough term. In Mahamudra, it's wonderful. Lama Yeshe, in his incredible effort, since he first met Westerners in the 60s, it was like, you know, if some of you have heard Tibetan Buddhist, classical Tibetan Buddhist teachers who've never spoken English, and they speak literally medieval, because that's all their texts are medieval, and it's marvelous. But it's like you're listening to another universe. It's like you can't believe. When I first heard Lama Zopa's teachings, the Lam Rim, when I first met the Dharma, when I was 31 or something, or 31, 32, in the 70s, I heard Lama Zopa did 1 month Lam Rim course, an intensive Lam Rim course. I mean, I knew I belonged there. I knew it was my path. I'd found where I belonged. But I didn't understand 99% of what he said. Not because I didn't understand his words, I did. But it was so arcane, so abstract. I thought, where is the Buddhism here? I mean, I had all these crazy expectations of what I thought Buddhism was, but it was arcane. It was literally medieval, straight out of Lama Tsongkhapa, 14th century, you know. So then when Lama Yeshe talked, it was so shocking, the difference. I couldn't believe it. First of all, his English is completely chaotic, but he had no pride. He didn't care if people thought he was stupid English. I mean, even when I edit him now, his English is just this stream of consciousness. He somehow was like he was born a hippie. He just knew how to talk to hippie Westerners in the mid-60s. I can't describe extraordinary. How was extraordinary, you know? He just chose words that were extraordinary to even know them. He was able to just configure things in a way that we talked. It was quite unusual, quite extraordinary. So this book, Mahamudra, that I edited, so fortunate, he taught it in like 82 or something, I can't remember, 1982. And so I identified in there 21 different terms that Lama used for the simple word delusion. So this first lot of negative states of mind, negative, neurotic, delusional, they're two main functions of the neurotic states of mind. The ones that Buddha says we can get rid of, the ones that are the cause of our suffering, the ones that are the source of why we harm others. There's two main categories, two main terms, two main functions. One is they're disturbing. And this is the first one we have to recognize. And this ought to be enough for us to never want to be angry again. If we recognize the pain that anger causes me, it's a deeply disturbing emotion at the emotional level. This is clear. We know this, but we know it, but then we think, well, you know, but it's not my fault. It's Fred's fault. Yeah, I'm angry, and I'm really angry, and I'm really disturbed, but it's Fred's fault, you know. So we don't look at the anger itself. So then the other one that's the one I want to get into here is much more subtle, and this is the real meaning of why we suffer. The other term, and in English it's brilliant. I've noticed in German, in Italian, in Hebrew, in different translations when I go around, there's no really, often there's not, this word is not used. It's a bit arcane, but in English it's brilliant, and it's bullseye for the way Buddha talks about why we suffer. And that is to say this word delusion. So when a Lama, he made up like 21 different terms. He just used any old crazy term to try and get us to understand how these neurotic states of mind worked. He was amazingly kind, so kind, you know. Some were traditional terms, but mostly just made them up to try and get us to understand the function of these crazy states of mind that we think are so normal, to try and get us to see how they cause so much suffering. So the word delusion is so key. And that is, delusion means we know ourselves, we know if we know English well, if you're, especially in the psychological terms, if you're considered delusional, it's a serious mental problem. And Buddha agrees because he says, we're all delusional. Get what, folks? Guess what? But it's a question of degree. So for us in psychological terms, if you're delusional, you're on the outer spectrum of crazy. That means you're living in la-la land. That means you're not in touch with reality. And I can't stress this enough. This is absolute bullseye for the Buddha. So the degree that we have any attachment, any anger, any jealousy, and I'm going to go into these states of mind, in particular attachment, is the degree to which we are not in touch with reality. And that's why we suffer, Buddha says. That's why we suffer. We're living in la-la land. There's a massive disconnect between what does exist and how we see what exists. And this is the major source of our pain and suffering. And this is crucial to understand. And this is not the analysis we use in our culture. This is Buddha's analysis, you know. So we need to understand that. It's so important. We've got 90 minutes or 2 hours? I forget. 2 hours?
Two hours whenever.
Good. Okay, great. So I'll just say a little bit more about attachment, because this is what we're getting to here. Preparing us so we can look at the 8 worldly dharmas. So it's 10 to, we've got 8 minutes. So let's just keep a bit more. Okay. So we'll have some questions then. So, okay. So Buddha apparently articulates 84,000 distinct mental problems. 84,000. And I keep asking all these geshis, where's this map of the mind? Because I mean, the Indians before him, even they mapped the mind. Buddha took this map, you know, internally mapped it, not the brain, internally mapped the mind. It's brilliant, genius. So he mentions 84,000 delusions. And even recently, young Lam Rim, who is the reincarnation of Dalai Lama's main guru, Lam Rim, and Lama Zopa's guru, Lama Yeshe's guru, many of our Lama's gurus. And he's like 30-something now, and he's amazing, the young Lam Rim. And he goes around traveling and teaching. And it's the first time I've ever heard this said, and many people tell me they never heard it being said before. So these 84,000 delusions, they also, this is not what he said, I'm getting to what he said, but they all subsume to the 3 poisons. Now we all know about the 3 poisons, we've heard it, isn't it? Or the 3, let's call it the 3 toxic emotions. And these sound so cute to us. Oh, I've got the 3 poisons. I mean, you don't go to the therapist. I've got the 3 poisons. I'll tell you to shut up and go home, you know. So the 3 poisons, and there's an intimate relationship between the 3 of them. I have to blow my nose, excuse me. Okay, so the 3 poisons, there's a hierarchical relationship between them. It's an intimate relationship. On the face of it, it's not evident to us because it's not our model. It's not our analysis. The root one is literally the root delusion, such that when that's uprooted, that's when you realize emptiness, and that's when you're out of samsara, baby. You're climbing out of your samsara and into your nirvana. Not quite out yet, but you can't go back after that. This is a huge one, the root delusion. So roughly speaking, it's a delusion, a lie, a misconception, you know, that misconceives to oneself the fundamental primordial way that everything exists. The actual ontological status of everything that exists. We get that wrong at the most fundamental level. So it's known as ego grasping or self-grasping when the object of that ignorance is the me, I. And so the experiential consequence of this, even in a rough sense, is you know, it's rooted in fear. But most of the time it's like a sleeping lion. It's only when you're attacked or offended or insulted, even mildly, that this one wakes up and the panic arises, fear arises, grasping arises. So it has the function of grasping the sense of self as being a separate self, cut off from others, bereft, lonely, nothing, nobody. That's the irony of this ego grasping. And so then that gives rise to the next delusion, and effectively, as far as the Four Noble Truths of Buddhas are concerned, this is the main cause of suffering in daily life. This is the main source of suffering. And of course, this is an insane concept to us. And it's called attachment, this cute word, you know. But to begin to understand attachment, Lama Yeshe said, I could tell you about it for one whole year. You will never begin to understand it until you start to build up something deeply inside. And that just takes time. You first know the theory, the definition, and then you start to unpack and unravel by being your own therapist, as Lama Yeshe says. Attachment. Effectively, it's the motor that propels us second by second by second. And this is where the Eight Worldly Dharmas begins to really make sense, because the Eight Worldly Dharmas is a presentation of this attachment at 8 different levels, of primordial levels, at the level of complete assumption. And I'll go into this in a minute. The third one, effectively, this attachment. No, I'll say more about attachment. This attachment at the Eight Worldly Dharmas level, the more primordial level, which we can really begin to see when we get into the more advanced stages. But here, it's mainly in terms of controlling our attachment in terms of the objects of the senses. At least, you know, in the beginning stages, you control your hands and your body. You don't shove every cake into your mouth. You don't jump on every boy you feel like it. That's controlling your speech and your body. But now you get to the attachment that informs that speech and that body, and you start to unpack that, and you start to see how attachment functions. So what's its function? Being a delusion, it necessarily exaggerates something. That's its key function. That's the way that these delusions function. They each have their own function to exaggerate their object. So remember the 84,000, and they all subsume to these 3. Oh, I forgot the Ling Rinpoche piece. He goes around and he says, and this is where people said they've never heard this before, that 22,000 of those 84,000 delusions are rooted in ego grasping, 22,000 are rooted in attachment, and 22,000 are rooted in a third one, which is called aversion or anger, and we'll go into this too. And then 22,000 are rooted in all 3. So it's a really sophisticated, coherent map of the mind, of just the delusions, you know. But all the Geshe say, well, I've never seen the map of the mind, so maybe it's just Buddha said it one time ago. Who knows? It has to be there somewhere. Anyway, these three main delusions, the summary of all the others. And it's a coherent map. All the others come from these 3. It's very fascinating, you know. So the ego grasping is the root, the most primordial, one that's there continuously and that completely colors everything we experience without a millisecond of a break. That causes, the root one causes, and these are the words for it, everything to appear to us as having an intrinsic, real, nature independent of me and everything else. We see everything existing out there from its own side, in and of itself, intrinsically, inherently. These are all the synonyms. Of course, this is so abstract for us, and only because this delusion is so primordial that we don't even see it as a mistake. We don't even see this even in our mind. There's no equivalent in modern psychology. On the basis of this, which is driven by fear, and it's this assumption of a concrete I, then the next one, effectively the main cause of all suffering, is attachment to get what that fantasy I wants. Attachment is multifaceted. So from practicing it in countless past lives, we get born with one of its major energetic consequences, which is primordial dissatisfaction. Primordial feeling of I am not enough, I don't have enough. Now, whatever I get, it's never enough. No matter how much my boyfriend looks at me and loves me and gives me things and strokes me and touches me and tastes me and smells me, it's never enough. No matter how much money I get, it's never enough. No matter how much food I get, it's never enough. It is a bottomless pit of unbearable dissatisfaction. This is the nightmare. As Lama Zopa says, this is the main suffering in the West, in the modern world. Unbearable dissatisfaction. And you could call that what we call self-loathing. It's a function of attachment. It's hard to see this, but when we start to understand attachment, we will start to see it. That's the most primordial level of attachment. So then naturally, because I'm dissatisfied, it's obvious. Or then this gives rise to this emotional hunger. I must get something to fill up the gaping hole. So depending on the karma, it's going to be boys, girls, you know, killing, food, you name it. Attachment is limitless in finding something due to your past habit that you dump the attachment on. And then the attachment does its key job of exaggerating the deliciousness of that object and exaggerating the power of that thing, event, person, whatever, thought, anything, the power of it such that when I get it, it will give me happiness. It will give me satisfaction. It will fill up the gaping hole and make the pain go away. And then, so that's its key job. It exaggerates. And the more strong the emotional hunger, the more strong the dissatisfaction, the more ridiculously exaggerated will the deliciousness of that boy, that cake be. Whether it's your own body you're attached to, whether it's your own thoughts you're attached to, whether it's somebody else you're attached to, whether it's music, whatever the object might be. This is the grosser level of attachment, the grosser level for an outside object. So it exaggerates. And then, of course, then it gives rise, because you're utterly believing it, when I get it, I'll get happy, then it gives rise to this manipulation, to a control freak. That's attachment. To get that thing at all costs. Why? Because you believe that when you get it, the pain will go away and you'll get some satisfaction, you'll get some joy, get some happy feelings. So happy feelings is a major thing we have to understand before we get anywhere near the 8 worldly dharmas as well. We'll go into it. So then this attachment is the motor that runs us every millisecond. And so the primordial way, the next level of attachment is once you get the object, then you possess it. It's mine. This is all the spectrum of attachment. And this is a fairly gross level for the objects, for the things, the events. And it's there every second. It's underneath everything. Even when we're a good person. You see, we have also the virtues. They're our saving grace. We have kindness and love and compassion. They are our saving grace. That's why we're not psychotic. A psychotic is the word we'd use for a person who's driven by attachment, who doesn't have much access to their virtue. Luckily, we've got access to our virtue. That's our saving grace. But nevertheless, this attachment is there and it pollutes our virtue. It's what drags us down. So then the essence of what attachment is, and it sounds so cruel, is it's this primordial hunger to get what I want every millisecond. That's it. And another way of putting that, it's this primordial emotional hunger that I must get only the nice things. Why? Because that's what triggers pleasant feelings. So we've got to get what I want, which is the nice things, and the nice things are what I think is nice. So that's what attachment is. It runs everything. And if that predominates in if that overrides your love, that's why you have a crazy relationship. If your love overrides your attachment, that's why there's any semblance of sanity in your relationship. But right now, as far as we're concerned, we conflate attachment and love. We don't even see the difference, which is why we all go crazy. So then that's the primordial level of attachment. It's a junkie in us that has to get what I want every second. And now what happens? What's the response when it doesn't get what it wants? That's the third one. That's called bare bones state of mind, is called aversion. Aversion. So attachment is, oh, that's nice, and you go towards it. Aversion is, oh, that's not nice, and you go away from it. Speaking very simply. But aversion too is multifaceted. So the obvious volatile level of aversion, which is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants, which is the response when attachment is thwarted, and this is 1,000 times a day. The obvious volatile level is what we call anger. So that's when you see a person shouting and yelling. Oh, look at that, she's angry. But you think, I'm not angry, I don't shout and yell. Well, you don't know your own mind. I'm sorry, you've got aversion arising 1,000 times a day, but it's not volatile. Yours manifests as irritated, annoyed, upset, frustrated, anxious, worried. They're all expressions of milder aversion, but we don't pay attention to those because we just think, oh, that's normal. So 1,000 times a day, look, when you get annoyed, you drop a cup while you're washing the dishes and you get annoyed. I've never met a person yet who doesn't get annoyed when they drop a cup. That's called anger, but you don't call it anger because it's mild and you hide it from yourself and you don't show it because you want to be seen to be a good girl. The mind arises, and you criticize yourself. That's wrong. How dare a cup? No, I shouldn't have broken a cup. That's called anger. I'm sorry, it's anger. But that happens 1,000 times a day. Frustration. Look at the word. Frustrated, annoyed, irritated. They're all mild versions of anger. But you don't think it's called anger because you don't shout and yell. And that's why we don't notice our mind. You notice the angry shouting ones. I mean, I shouted and yelled when I didn't get what I wanted. Everybody could see Rabina was angry and I couldn't argue with it. But some of my sisters never raised their voices. Oh, she's so patient. No, was suppressed, annoyed, upset all the time. And that's the person who either gets depressed and goes crazy and kills themselves. So anger has a whole spectrum, from anger, volatile shouting, to annoyed, irritated, frustrated, and then finally, internally, to depression and despair. That's internalized anger. In other words, that is the response every time the slightest wrong thing happens. For me, wrong, the wrong taste, the wrong smell, the wrong sight, the wrong word, the wrong behavior from the boyfriend. You feel slightly wrong, a slight pain in the knee, a slight pain in your ear. The thing doesn't happen exactly as attachment wants. That second is what aversion is, that arising. And this is 1,000 times a day. But we never pay attention until the wheels are falling off. That's the wheels wobbling. And that's the level of awareness we need to cultivate. And when we can cultivate that level of awareness, then we do the next step, which once we see it and then we argue with it, that's being your own therapist. We'll talk about that. So these are the 3 poisons. Sounds so cute. They are primordial. And all the other delusions are rooted in these. Jealousy, arrogance, they're all rooted in these. These are the 3, the fundamental ones. All the 84,000 subsumed to these. So it's not simplistic, it's profound. So you learn this in high school. You learn it when you study low rig, and that's just learning the botany. But you can't become a brilliant gardener overnight by learning the theories. You've got to then start to put meat on the bones every day by observing your mind, catching these thoughts and feelings and emotions until you start to become really skillful at recognizing. Because we have 1,000 thoughts a second, you know. That's what they say in the West even. Buddha would agree. So now I think a few questions before we continue. Unless you want a 5-minute break, or we just carry on. So up to you guys. Have some questions now if you'd like. If not, I'll keep going. Up to you people.
If there are any questions, you can press on the participants tab and you can...
If there aren't any there, we'll just keep going. Are there any there? No? Nothing there?
No, there's no...
There's Christian.
No.
Christian's got a question. Christian, come on.
Christian.
Go. What's your question, Christian? Unmute you. I can't hear you, darling.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The audio sometimes doesn't work.
Sorry,
Okay. Venerable Rubina, you just mentioned that point. Then you start arguing with that deluded mind, or all these thoughts. I don't know if you will go on about this, but my question
that's the beginning of the hard work when we start to do the argument. I'm going to go into it. Absolutely. We'll do a scenario and we'll show
just a remark, or let's say where I find myself at the moment when I start arguing with all these thoughts. Sometimes I feel like getting even more lost, and
that's not a proper argument. That's just kind of shouting and yelling at yourself and putting yourself down. That's not what I'm describing. I'm describing that's like having a fight with somebody else. That's not productive. I'm talking about have a civilized conversation with yourself using logic to break down ego's misconceptions. That's a very sane, rational thing to do. I'm not talking about having an argument with yourself and shouting and yelling. That's what we do all day, honey. That's not productive.
Yeah. Okay, let's see.
Imagine you're fighting with somebody, that's the one you're talking about. But imagine having a civilized, logical conversation. That's the kind of work we have to do internally. And I'm not joking. That's exactly what we have to learn to do. It's quite hard, but that's how we start to break down the misconceptions using logic. And I'll go through this. I'll do like a little analysis. I'll explain it.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Good, Christian. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I think then, who else? Anybody else? Nobody? No? Okay, no problem. I'll continue. I'll
Somebody
continue.
has a question, you can also write your name or the question in the chat, because maybe
problem.
somebody is not courageous to speak it out. So to speak,
Okay,
you
so
can
let's talk then. Let's just start the job of imagining now we've understood there's ignorance, we've understood there's attachment, we've understood aversion. So let's do a little analysis plus the view of karma, which I haven't even begun to describe yet, but if any of you guys have studied, you know a bit about karma. But well, these are the two tools, the two views, the two assumptions, the two philosophical viewpoints that we would use as a basis for our job of breaking down and discussing in our own mind, and therefore practicing day by day, being our own therapist. This is the actual nuts and bolts of being a Buddhist. Day to day, not on your cushion, day to day, on the toilet, walking, whatever. On your cushion too, definitely. So if we look at the Four Noble Truths, which is Buddha's first teaching, the four truths for the noble ones, the four facts, I prefer the word fact, it sounds more down to earth, the four facts of life for the noble ones, those who've realized these four. Well, this is Buddha's teachings about suffering. There's four, what happened? Okay, there's four. So there's four fundamental points. The first is there is suffering. The second is there are causes. The third, you can get rid of it. How amazing, unbelievable, both suffering and its causes. And the fourth is how to do it. Really simply speaking. Of course, it's presented in great detail and quite nuanced way in all the different texts, but this is the essence of these four. So the very first one, just to discuss it here, we won't go too much detail into this now, but the Buddha's crucial point is we have to understand this to understand the compassion wing. We've got to understand the three kinds of suffering. So there's three levels of suffering. The first one is what we all agree is suffering, which is when the bad things happen. And this is an easy way to look at attachment and anger in our ordinary daily lives, because the first kind of suffering is when the bad things happen, and that's when anger arises. It's very clear. How dare that happen? This is not fair. How dare my boyfriend say those mean words to me? That's when so the suffering of suffering is when the bad things happen. So of course, as we know from Buddha's more broad picture of the universe, this suffering of suffering is at a deeper level is referring to the lower realms of suffering. But here we're describing it in terms of just this life, and this we can get hold of, you know. So we can see in our lives things happen that we don't want. So what that means is the bad things happening, another way to frame it is when attachment doesn't get what it wants. Think about it. It's a profound way to put it, because if you look at the second noble truth, the causes of suffering, Buddha narrows it down to two main causes. There are thousands of various things that have to come together to produce anything: a thermos, a lamp, a computer, a flower, well, a moment of happiness and suffering as well. Many things have to come together for that moment of suffering to occur. There has to be the boyfriend there. There has to be Christian, let's say, who punches me in the nose or says the mean words. That's the external condition. Well, for us, that's the main cause. We all know that. And if you're happy, it's the same thing. Why are you happy, Rabina? Oh, Christian was kind to me. So as far as we're concerned, the main cause of my happiness is Christian's goodness, his gift to me, and the main cause of my suffering, his punch. That's what we think. Well, Buddha says, yeah, sure, that happened. That's one of the conditions. It is one of the causes, but it's merely a catalyst, Rabina. So let's look at the main causes, honey. And they are two, and they're both inside me. This is what's shocking for the happiness as well. The two main causes of my suffering are one, karma, past action, 22 lives ago, whatever, that I did to this person. Karma's pretty personal. That would have been called a negative action, which is an action that's an action of my body and speech that harmed him, that is based upon number two cause, the delusion. So karma and delusions, these two are the main causes of all sufferings, all instances of all suffering of all sentient beings since beginningless time. One, the action we did, and two, the delusion that motivated it. So they're the two main causes of my suffering. So taking that view gives me now the tools to do this internal analysis. This is taking karma and then the delusion. So you learn about karma in junior school and you learn about delusions in high school. So then on the basis of knowing a bit about karma and knowing a bit about the delusions, these, Christian, are the tools that then they give me the basis for the analysis of being my own therapist in dealing with the events of my daily life. I'll do that analysis. I'll just do a little scenario. So, okay. So that means, let's say Christian, you know, let's say he, I don't know, just he's mean to me. He shouts at me. Something simple, something not like too brutal. Just he shouts at me. He's mean to me. So let's analyze my response. The first response I have, and this is absolutely the world, now, especially if I did nothing to deserve it. I wasn't even arguing. I was sitting there quietly, but for whatever reason, he couldn't stand what I was doing, so he shouts at me. So as far as I'm concerned, think about this. I'm a complete innocent victim. I was sitting there, and then the first response I have is complete shock when Christian just criticizes me. And the first response is, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That's the natural response of a normal person who's got ego grasping, attachment, and aversion, and who is the product of their past actions, which is called karma. So with complete ignorance of any of this, because none of that's our analysis in the West, as far as I'm concerned, when I go to my therapist and I tell her what Christian did, and she will have sympathy for me, and she will also know I'm an innocent victim, that I really did nothing to deserve it. These words are so powerful. We'll spend the next hour unpacking these concepts, these feelings. So the deserve one is so powerful. I could discuss this, I can't tell you, it's so powerful. This is just the karmic one. Forget the delusions. This is the karmic one. The Buddha would say, every sentient being in the universe, every millisecond, what we think and do and say, sow seeds in our mind that ripen as the future me, and will ripen either as a type of rebirth, a tendency to keep doing it, an experience of it happening to me. This is the example here, and even an environmental result. Everything, all happiness, all suffering. This is the creation principle in Buddhism. As Dalai Lama calls it, it's self-creation. We don't need creators. There's no conspiracy theory who's doing it to us. Every sentient being, every second is experiencing the fruits of their past actions. And every second, every sentient being is sowing seeds that will produce their future results. We are the boss. And until we begin to comprehend karma, we're schizophrenic. Lama Yeshe would joke and he'd say that. You're like disconnected. And that's what we mean when we say, I don't deserve it. Now, you think about this. I'm sitting there, and out of the blue, you know, out of the blue with no evident cause, Christian gives me $100. I will go, amazing. I can't believe how lucky I am. We'd even argue, what did I do to deserve this? So nothing. But I don't care if I don't deserve it. Give me more, please, because we want the $100 and we don't want the punch. So the point is, so what arises when the punch comes is attachment just didn't get what it wanted, because attachment's the default assumption that only wants the nice things. It only wants the kisses and the stroking and the $100 and the pleasant sound and the loving looks and the loving and the kindness. It's reasonable, but this is attachment. It's a junkie. It can only cope with nice things. And it's a junkie that manipulates like a junkie to get only the nice things. Why? Because the assumption of attachment is that when I get the nice thing, that's what will bring me happiness. So I've got to get the nice things because I know I'm hungry for happiness, and it's perfectly fine to want happiness. We'll go into this later. So the millisecond that I get the punch, or just the mean, forget the punch, the mean words, and I'm doing nothing to deserve it, I'm not arguing with him, then the hurt that arises, the outrage, and that's what anger is. And it's also the view, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. So now listen to this. If I've been brought up with the philosophy of materialism, which most of us have, then the assumption is that my mother and father made me. There was no Rabina before my mother and father hopped into bed and had sex. That they created Rabina. They gave me my brain, my anger, my love, my kindness, my jealousy, my good things, my bad things. This is the view we take as a given. We don't study it. We just assume it's true. And then we track ourselves back to mummy, daddy, grandma, and the monkeys, don't we? That's the evolution of our thinking, to try and find the source of what Rabina is. You look into the parents. That's what we do. That's our view. So obviously, if I've just met Christian, I've never met the man before in this life, and suddenly we're sitting in there in the bar and he says rude words to me, then it feels absolutely accurate and valid to think, how dare he do that to me? I don't deserve it. So you are correct if you began in your mother's womb. You are correct to say that if you've never met the man before. But that's what we think in the materialist world, isn't it? Well, Buddha disagrees. My mind goes back since beginningless time. Every single person I meet is not a random event. If I have never met him in this life, I've met him countless thousands of lifetimes before, and the first time he sees me, he can't stand the sight of me. That's because I've harmed him before. So he can't help himself but to say, you look at that old silly old ugly looking woman over there, or whatever he says to me. So then, of course, I created the cause. If I hadn't sowed a seed of doing something like that 42 lives ago to that person, karma's personal, then it would not happen. I wouldn't even meet him. It would not possibly happen, because the karmic view is a natural law. This is shocking to us. We think life is random. We think it's all good luck and bad luck. No wonder we suffer. No wonder we go crazy. Well, that's as idiotic as thinking that what grows in gardens is random. There's no such law. You've never heard of botany. No one knows why things grow. It's just the way it is, you know. That's as idiocy. It's plain stupidity. The Buddha says this is a natural law. He's observed it. He's articulated it. It's all there in the literature. And there's nothing that would happen to me that I didn't cause, because my mind goes back to beginningless time. And there's no person I meet whom I would meet without having met them before. There's no action Christian would do to me that he would do to me if I haven't done it to him before. This is logic for the Buddha. It's not logic for us. We think it's weird, you know. It sounds like punishment and reward. But it's not punishment. It's not reward, because there's no punisher and there's no rewarder in Buddhism. So if I look in my garden, and the Buddha uses the analogy of seeds and fruits all the time. If I look in my garden and I see there are lots of weeds there, I don't say with shock, how dare there be weeds in my garden? I don't deserve weeds. Nobody would say that, but listen to the reason why. Because we know it's my garden. And what's in my garden is my responsibility. So even if I don't remember, I must not have pulled those weeds out. I mightn't even have known about it, but I have to be accountable. I have to take responsibility. It's my garden. So when I know it's my garden, I would never say, who put weeds in my garden? I don't deserve it. It's a demented view. It's based on a false assumption. Now, you don't look in your bank account and say, how dare there be no francs in my bank account? I deserve francs. That implies that someone else's job is to put francs in that's schizophrenic. It's my bank account. What is in there or not there is my responsibility. Well, guess what? My life is my bank account, and my life is my garden. So automatically, with the view of karma, now Tibetans are brought up with this for the last 1200 years. It's in the bones of their being. In the bones of our being is a materialist view. So that's why karma sounds so wacko to us. It's just the view that they've been brought up with. It's in the bones of their being. It's an assumption they take as a given. And that's why, you listen to this, that when you have the view of karma, not just intellectually, experientially, of course you would never be angry, because listen to anger. Anger is, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That has no basis in reality, Buddha says. No basis, because if you had the view of karma, you know, my friend Jigdrol, a Tibetan, 30 years ago, when he was telling me about how he'd been tortured and everything, blah, 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 in Tibet, and then escaped. And he was sad. And I said to him very casually, I said, do you ever get angry, Jigdrol? And he laughed really casually and said, angry you've been, and what for? It's our own fault. Now, those words are too shocking for us. He was just speaking in a most natural way about karma, because that's the view of the universe that they've had. It's been around for 3,000 years, this view. Not new to us in our world, of course it is. So when it's really integrated inside you and it becomes your view, it becomes how you see the world, then anger would not be a possibility. It couldn't be. It's impossible. Because anger is the shock that something that happened that you know you don't deserve because you don't remember having done it before. Well, we don't remember having done it before, but if you have the view of karma, you know you must have done it before. And it's exactly the same when it comes to happiness. Instead of thinking, oh, aren't I lucky? He just gave me $100. Lucky is an insane idea. Oh, aren't I lucky? Look at all those roses in my garden. No, you're not lucky. You worked hard. You don't say, I'm lucky. You worked hard for those roses. You don't just say, oh, aren't I lucky? I've got 1,000 francs in the bank. No, you're not lucky. You deserve them. You put them there. So Buddha doesn't use the word deserve. We use it. It's so heavy. But when you have the view of karma, this is why you can't avoid karma if you want to be a proper jump in the deep end Buddhist. You've got to think about karma. And it takes so much time to internalize it because it's fundamentally different philosophical view from either the one of Christianity, that God made you, or that your mummy and daddy made you. In Buddha's case, someone else making you is the wackiest thing he's ever heard. It's impossible. It's like a joke. Our mind is ours. Everything we experience is the fruit of what we have done. It's not too difficult conceptually. It's just too shocking for us, that's all. Because we hear it as punishment and reward. But there's no punisher and there's no rewarder. We do it to ourselves. So when we begin to have the view of karma, this is junior school, we become accountable. We become grown up. We start to change radically. We stop being a victim. We stop blaming, stop getting angry, stop getting guilty. I'm not joking. It's a huge view. So this is the first analysis, Christian. Massive analysis in my own mind, not with you, in my own mind. And this is the beginning of, this is the future one. This is what's transforming problems. It's too hard for most of us if I'm really trying to use it as my practice. This is enormous. So but the thing is, we don't care. I always joke and say it's true. We all ask the same questions, but I've never had a person ask me the question, Robina, why do good things happen? We don't care why good things happen. And why? Because we assume we deserve good. It's the hubris of this, the arrogance of attachment. That's attachment. It's this assumption that I deserve only the good things. And how dare bad things happen? It's so arrogant, you can't believe it. It sounds very shocking to talk this way. But that's when you start to unpack attachment and aversion, which we take for granted, that we don't even pay attention to. They're arrogant, they're demented, they're schizophrenic, and they're mistaken, based on karma, which is Buddha's view. But we never ask why do good things happen, because we assume we deserve them, and give me more, please. But we are outraged when the smallest bad thing happens. We're devastated. And I'm not diminishing our suffering. What I'm pointing out here is why we suffer. Don't beat ourselves up for this. Don't be guilty. This is why we suffer. This is why we all go to therapists. This is why we kill each other and someone else, because we all live in these mistaken philosophical viewpoints deep in our bones. So there's plenty of unpacking to do, I tell you. So this is arguing with the view of deserve. It's arguing with the misconception of attachment, this junkie that thinks I only deserve the good things. In other words, we mean we deserve it, but we don't think we have to do anything to deserve it. We just deserve it in our bones. And we don't deserve anything bad, even if we did cause it. We just think we don't deserve. It's meaningless for the Buddha if we analyze these thoughts. It really is powerful to do this type of analysis. So my friend Jigdral didn't have anger. He'd been tortured. His family had been destroyed. His country was destroyed. But he wasn't angry. These young nuns I always quote about 2003 when I was working with the prison project in San Francisco, and Richard Gere invited a bunch of Buddhists, a bunch of former prisoners to meet His Holiness. And, you know, I'd been working with people in prison, so some people like me were invited too, like 20 former prisoners. And they all talked about their suffering in prison and the racism and the sexism and the politics and the dramas. And anyway, they all met His Holiness. It was a wonderful day. So Richard Gere also invited 2 young Tibetan nuns to come to give a talk. So these young women had been in prison a couple of years, and they were young women, 20s or something, nuns, and they'd been sexually abused and tortured for a couple of years. So probably, you know, if you think of the Americans there, they probably would have probably thought, well, you know, these young women suffering is more than everybody put together, if you want to quantify suffering. And they also, but the shocking part was that they could observe they were not angry. This is hard for us to conceptualize. When we think people aren't angry, we just think they're suppressing, because we think anger is a helpful, useful, necessary state of mind. But what I've been doing is giving the analysis of what anger is, being a delusion and a distorted state of mind based upon the attachment not getting what it wants, which is based upon the assumption of a separate me. The analysis psychologically of these three is really profound. It's false. And then based on the view of karma, you know. So these young women, having the view of karma in the bones of their being since they're born, learning to work with it in their experience every single second of their day, and you know, not having anger. In other words, they're not pulling their hair out saying, why is this happening to me? Because think of that now. In our culture, we don't have a view of karma. Therefore, we don't know why bad things happen to ourselves, and much of the time we have no analysis of why bad things happen to people out there. That's why we all go crazy. That's why we go killing each other and have wars, because we can see no evidence of something, that innocent group of people sitting in that little village, why they come and get raped and murdered in some particular war. There's no logic to us. No wonder we all go crazy. No wonder we all go mad. We have no explanation of why. Now, what I'm talking here is Buddha's explanation. That's up to us. No one's forcing Buddha's view down our throats. The Buddha gives the explanation, his view, which he says we can also know when we start to get single point of concentration and get some realizations. We can prove it to be true. It's not just blind belief. That's absurd. It's fact, Buddha says. So you take it as your working hypothesis. So these young women were not angry. They were in tears. And then they said, or one of them said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers, because we know we must have harmed them in the past, and because we know they will suffer in the future. So this is the basis of valid compassion. And all this wisdom wing work we're describing, to get to the compassion wing, to get to the 8 worldly dharmas, to get to transforming problems, which is the framework of the 8 worldly dharmas, all this is implied. You've got to have the wisdom wing under your belt. You've got to be a suitable vessel, which means understanding karma, understanding the delusions, understanding the mind, working on yourself, having renunciation, subduing your body, speech, and mind. That's a suitable vessel to do this outrageous level of turning around the 8 worldly dharmas and transforming problems and learning to cherish others more than self. It's outrageous level of teachings. This is the background. Without this, you can't possibly do that more advanced teachings. Impossible, impossible, impossible. Now some questions come on. 12:30. My 12:30. Your 8:30.
Venerable Rubina, there's a question from Nancy. Dear Venerable Rubina, you said that if I get something and I'm happy, that's called attachment because my ego gets what it wants. If my ego doesn't get what it wants, I get angry because of aversion. But how or what do advanced or enlightened people feel when they are neither happy nor angry?
Okay,
what is the state of mind, and how do they feel at all? Thank you.
That's a very good question. It's a very good question. And this is really all completely linked to the practices we're trying to cultivate in the more advanced levels, which we're going to start with next week, where the 8 worldly dharmas fits in. We're going to get into this. But we've got to now look at a bit more analysis of how happiness arises and how suffering arises. We have to look at this first. And this is really, again, the technology of this is so helpful. So in the 3 categories of states of mind, remember, we've got the neurotic, deluded, I-based, fear-based, crazy, demented states of mind. We've got the valid, reasonable, virtuous, positive, appropriate states of mind. The third lot, these mechanics, like I said, there's all these kind of the concentration, the good memory, discrimination. Many of these are all playing their role every second to be able to have a reasonable experience. If any of those is missing, you become like a crazy person, So in that category also, this is initially quite weird. There's another one called feeling. And this, I cannot describe how necessary it is to understand the Buddha's view of what feeling, the word feeling, means. When Buddha described the 5 aggregates, it's basically his presentation in one of his sutras about what makes up a person. So essentially we've got body and we've got mind, but he turned it into 5. And the 2, so he got form is body, is the physical, then he's got feeling and discrimination. These are both in that neutral category. These are both in that mechanics of the mind. And why he plucked them out, there are thousands of them, but typically in the text when you study, there are 51 of these states of mind that you study when you study Lorig. And all the different states of mind, like love, attachment, this one, that one, they're in that 51. So he plucked out these 2 among those 51 and gave them this crucial status because of the power of their function in the way we perpetuate samsara. Okay, so feeling. What's feeling? It's not the way we think of as an emotion. It's like not virtuous and it's not non-virtuous. But because of the very way we exist in this world, we can say we have 3 kinds of feeling. We either have a pleasant feeling, an unpleasant feeling, or a neutral feeling. Well, let's forget the neutral, okay? Let's look at the pleasant and the unpleasant. Well, these words are synonymous with happiness and suffering. Now, you think how we think about happiness and suffering. When I say, oh, I'm so happy, you say, tell me about your happiness, Robina, and I'll proceed to tell you all the good things Christian did for me, because we are so obsessed with the outside and so convinced that Christian's kindness and his donations and his lovingness to me are the causes of my happiness, so much so that I think that's the happiness. When we think about happiness, we think of the events. Think about this. Why are you suffering, Robina? I will tell you all the bad things Christian did, and I will remember the events and remember the ugly thing and remember the words and remember the beating on the, the punching in the nose. That's because we're so addicted to the outside world. But happiness and suffering are internal. They're the states of mind. That Christian's actions are merely catalyst. The bad food is a mere catalyst. The $1 million in the bank is a mere catalyst for happy feelings. The punch in the nose is a mere catalyst for the suffering feelings. So feeling is the mind, and including the sensory. So you've only got 3 options. Forget the neutral ones. We only have got 2. And all we care is what for. We want happy feelings. We don't want suffering feelings. Now, Buddha's entire teachings can be framed in terms of, as His Holiness says, as the Buddha says, everybody wants to be happy. Nobody wants to suffer. That's the most primordial truth you could find. And you could frame the entirety of Buddha's teachings as methods for ourselves first to stop suffering and get happiness. This is the point. So it's hugely important to talk about happiness and suffering. So then Buddha's view is, hey, babes, I've found some methods to get rid of suffering and its causes, which means I found methods to get happiness and its causes. That's what Buddhism is. It's another way of presenting the whole of the path. So right now, our being in samsara, our being locked in these delusions, because in samsara is both going from life to life suffering, or more precisely, the internal is the samsara. You're actually being caught up in these delusions is you're in samsara. You've got your own internal samsara driven by these crazy 3 poisons and the other 83,997. That's being in samsara. So what Buddha's saying basically is this. I'm sorry, people, you've got the wrong end of the stick. You think, we right now think that happy feelings are what we get when we get what attachment wants. That's the method we use. We don't know any other method. Think about it. Just you wake up in the morning, just to think that you can just sit there and get blissful feelings. We go mad within 10 minutes if we don't have some sensory object. We go completely berserk because we are all junkies. This is the very nature of this body we have. This physical world we exist in is the product over countless lives of our practice of attachment. What do you think 5 senses? They're 5 holes that demand feeding. That's the result. It's like karmic evolution over countless lifetimes before this planet even. We have created bodies, penises, vaginas, eyes, ears, holes to be fed. And what do you think the external world is? A bunch of objects you've got to shove into your 5 senses. We've created this schizophrenic, separate, dualistic world of minds and objects. This is the result of attachment. So our method for getting happy feelings, and we all want happy feelings, and that's perfectly valid. Nothing wrong with happy feelings. But it's our methods that make a mess. The only method we know to get happy feelings, to trigger a moment of pleasure, we have to get an object. We know occasionally, you can just feel happy for a second, but it's so unstable. We've got to get the cake, the boy, the sound, the smell, the weather, every damn thing out there. All the 5 objects of the senses have all got to be aligned up perfectly to suit me so I can get happy feelings. But look how hard it is. And this is where Buddha now talks about the second kind of suffering in the second noble truth. He calls the second kind of suffering the suffering of change. It sounds kind of boring, but it's what we call happiness. What we call suffering is only the first one, when the bad things happen. So understanding the causes in the second noble truth, and we understand attachment is the main cause of all suffering, then as far as we're concerned, suffering, the suffering of suffering for the Buddha, is when attachment doesn't get what it wants. Now, the second kind of suffering, more nuanced, that we call happiness, That's when attachment does get what it wants. And that's all we think there is. But that's the happiness of a junkie. When a junkie puts a cigarette in the mouth or jumps on that new boy or gets that piece of cake, we're talking the gross level here, or gets the heroin fix, we know it does trigger a pleasant feeling. There is no doubt about that. But the Buddha says very simply and very humbly, well, honey, I'm sorry, it doesn't last. But because we know it doesn't last, we've never heard of happiness that lasts. So we just go, well, what are you telling us it doesn't last for? You're trying to make us miserable? What else? What choice have I got? What option do I have? The best I can do is have a moment of pleasure from cake, a moment of pleasure from touching Christian. What choice do I have? And Buddha says, hey, babies, I found a method. Hey, sweetie pies, I found a method to get happy feelings all the time that don't depend on a stupid old ugly body or cake or whatever you think it is. And that's what he's saying is the nature of our mind. That our mind, and this is why Lama's so trying to encourage us just to get Singapore to concentration, because he says you can't believe the joyful feelings, happy feelings, because happy feelings, as Lama says, rapture, ecstasy, he's not joking, is the natural state of an ordinary mind when it's unencumbered by attachment. Duh. So for us, happy feelings are what we get just a flash of, a second of, hardly touch the surface of when we get what attachment wants. And that's our methodology. The Buddha says, no, guys, I found a method. You've got to take a while. It's free. You've got to give up sex, drugs, and roll, go to the mountains, give up your husband, mortgages, babies, this, that. And you've got to have pretty already advanced to get to the mountains where you can get Singapore into concentration. And even just then, temporarily, because you've subdued the grosser level of conceptuality, you've subdued the ridiculous, grotesque senses, you've subdued, therefore, attachment and aversion, all the junky rubbish of your mind, even just temporarily, then you will just naturally access the subtle level of your mind. And you will just naturally have extraordinary, as Lama says, ecstasy, rapture. And he is not joking. This is the natural state of our mind. You will have happy feelings all the time. Now, we've done this in countless lives, Buddha says, but we've lost it because we haven't used single point of concentration to realize emptiness and cut the root of all suffering, because it's only then that we can never have that grosser suffering again. But even just to get happy feelings is the high school. Even just to subdue your mind, to forget single point of concentration, forget ecstasy and rapture. Just subduing your body and speech and mind, the Buddha says, is the method for getting more happy feelings. In other words, when you've got some semblance of renunciation, forget concentration, please. You've just subdued your crazy body, you've subdued your crazy mind, and you've begun to really subdue your attachment and your aversion and your depression and your anxiety and your jealousy, not suppressed, but literally conquered, then you will become a very blissful, joyful, easygoing, content human being. Check the people we know. Even on the face of it, Dalai Lama, for 60 years, look at the suffering of his life. He's a happy, funny fellow. Look at Lama Zopa, he's cackling with laughter 99% of the time, 100% of the time. Look at even fairly subdued, anybody you can see is a bit of a meditator. They're happy people. They've got happy feelings, not from cakes and sex and drugs and rock and roll, but from subduing and lessening attachment and therefore anger and the rest. So that's all the way to getting realization of emptiness. That's the method when you never go backwards. Even getting single point of concentration, you can't imagine the joyful feelings you'll have. But forget that, just getting renunciation of suffering and its causes, you will have happy feelings most of the time. So I hope that answers the question, Talia. Happiness is our natural state when we have rid the mind of the rubbish. That's Buddha's entire point of his entire path.
Thank you, Venerable.
And that's not the end result. You've got to add compassion wing to that and you help other people get it as well. It's logical psychology, but we can't hear it like that. We hear it in religious terms. We hear it in punitive terms. As Lama Yeshe Zopa says, when we hear we've got to give up attachment, we go, oh, I've got to give up my happiness. I've got to give up my heart, because we conflate attachment and pleasure, and they are completely separate states of mind. So we have to study the mind. What else, Talia? Any more questions?
Is there anyone that have any questions? Please raise your hand, unmute yourself, or write. Okay, there is a question from
Cool.
attachment feeds the brain. What should we use to replace it while we get working on it?
Sorry.
Even at the gross level.
Talia, who's the person? I want to speak to this person. I can't understand.
And can you unmute yourself? Or I can speak the.
Who's
I
the
don't
person?
think she has camera.
Well, I don't care. I want to hear her voice because I don't understand that question. I need to hear her. Where are you, Anne? Are you there, darling?
Hello.
Perfect.
Where are you, sweetheart?
Hello. I have no camera. Sorry.
Oh, no, I got it. Are you ANNES? Is that you?
Yes.
Oh, good, darling. Talk to me, Anna. So I didn't understand that question. I don't understand what attachment feeds the brain. What do you mean by that, darling?
Okay. It seems to me that a lot of my anxiety comes from my fear of being bored. And so I catch many things, like I can even see my relationship to tobacco, you know, it's something to, yeah.
It triggers happy feelings. Use this Buddhist language.
No, I'm sorry. I'm not sure that it makes me happy, but I'm quite.
No. Okay,
busy,
darling,
you know?
stop. Before you go further, Anne, before you go further, let's speak really humbly and simply. It does. Why would you have a cigarette? If it caused you to get a stabbing pain in your neck, you would not smoke a cigarette. So it is obvious, the most fundamental feeling that arises the moment you put the cake in the mouth, the moment you take the mouthful of alcohol, the moment you touch the nice girl or whatever it is you touch, the moment you have the cigarette, of course, the only reason is to trigger a pleasant feeling. So of course it is I'm not talking happiness like a great big emotional feeling. I'm talking second by second by second. So of course, the wish for happy feelings is what drives your attachment to go get the cigarette in the hope that because you know it becomes an addiction, and that's the point. That's what really Buddha is saying. Attachment is basically a junkie. The only reason we do it is to get a happy feeling. That's exactly the point. There's no other reason. If it gave you a stabbing pain in your head, you'd never smoke ever. You would not. We can see long term, this is the point. Now, long term, we can see with some substances or things we have too much of, it will cause physical pain. Like if you eat too much, you'll get fat. If you smoke cigarettes, you might get cancer. If you have heroin, it'll be terrible. But the attachment's more subtle than that. That's where, just wanting all the time to get something, because we're junkies, basically. So the real suffering of attachment is the more, my mother used to say it, the more you get, the more you want. So we know in the end, we did it in the beginning to get a happy feeling, to alleviate the suffering, but then in the end it causes this terrible suffering of craving it the whole time. And that's what Buddha means by the subtler level of suffering of attachment. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
Am I answering the question at all, darling, or not? Or you want to say more? Please, I want to hear your thoughts.
But my thinking is what I feel, at least, is that I feel busy.
You feel what, darling?
I feel busy.
That's a function of attachment. We always want to be doing something. We go crazy just to sit there, won't we? That's the busyness. You see, one other function of attachment, it's very interesting, and is that it's when we look at our thoughts, they never stop. Always wanting this, wanting that. And I'll do this, now I'll do that. Then I'll move, then I'll sit up, then I'll stand down, then I'll go here, then I'll go to bed, then I'll get up. That's exactly one of the energies of attachment. And that's why that's why we can learn actually to be skillful to use our attachment energy by channeling it into something useful. This is like a stepping stone, We can't give it up yet, it's too advanced. But if we can be skillful, and that's the Bodhisattva path, we can channel our attachment into doing useful things for others. And then it also brings us some satisfaction. So otherwise we just go crazy, It's really true.
And what would you qualify of useful things, for instance?
Help others, darling. Things that help others. If you have a job that helps other people, if you go out and help people, you go out and do a job to help people, go feed COVID-19 patients, go sweep the next door lady's floor, do anything that is useful, either to help you develop your qualities, go learn more things, or go and help other people. Then you channel your energy, you channel it. And that's very helpful. I mean, eventually we've got to give attachment up, but we can be skillful and use it. to do useful things. I mean, what we do now is we go and, watch, people who are addicted to sex, they watch videos 12 hours a day, or they go and smoke 40 million cigarettes, or they go and jump on 19 boys. That's not helpful channeling. That just makes it all worse. But if you utilize your attachment to mix it with kindness and mix it with compassion, there's a usefulness to that. Then you forget about yourself and you're happy that you're helping other people. And that brings a certain kind of satisfaction that's very delicious. You understand what I'm saying, Anne?
Thank you.
That's a stepping stone to it. As we progress, we've got to give it up eventually. And so to answer Talia's question of the first person, bodhisattvas who've given up attachment and given up delusions, their minds are happy all the time. And then when they do help other people, that's even a more bonus on the top. Or if they do taste a piece of cake, they get even more pleasure. But they're already happy because they've given up the delusions. But we can be skillful, Anne, in channeling our energy. This is a very helpful thing. Like if you get a crazy little kid who's got masses of energy, you can't tell them to stop. They'll go mad, but channel it. Get them to do something useful with it. Get them to be creative. That's useful to others, not a destructive action, a positive action. Do you understand what I'm saying, Anne? Very good point, darling. It's a very good point you brought up. So be wise with yourself, darling. We've got to recognize the attachment, but see if we can, not sit there going crazy and stopping the cigarettes and stopping the food and stopping this. The great yogis can do that because they can channel their energy in meditation, but most of us can't. So we be wise with ourselves. Thank you, Anne. It's very helpful.
Thank you, Robina.
Good, darling. Thank you. Talia, what else?
Okay, and there's a question from Dimitri, but I don't quite understand the question. So Dimitri, would you like to say it yourself? Basically, just one line. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, hello, everyone.
Where's
Robina,
Dimitri?
I have a question.
Dimitri, where are you? I can't see you.
Camera is not functioning, sorry.
Oh, okay, go on. So I hear your voice. Okay, good. Talk to me.
So I'm trying to understand the border between karma and free arbitrator.
Between what? Karma and what, Dimitri?
And between the free mind, when...
I understand. No, it's a very good question. It's a very common question. We all have this one. So let's do an analysis. Should we do an analysis of it to answer your question?
Sure, please.
Thank you very much. So I think the term that we use in English, which is free will. You've heard that phrase, free will. Yeah. But first of all, I want to say this. It's very fascinating that as far as I can tell, the evolution of that phrase is coming from Christianity. It's something that God gave us when he made us. But for whatever reason now, we've taken it as a scientific fact, this thing called free will. Well, first of all, Buddha, I just want to give that background. That's where it seems to come from. But what do we mean by free will? So I think I need to debate with you a little bit. So tell me what you mean by free will. Give an exact, simple example, Dimitri.
Just for example, I always had this example in my head. So for example, if I take a hammer and I hit my hand, it's like a stupid thing to do. But my question, if I decided if the idea to do it, is it because of a karma or because I decided to do it?
Okay, so a good question. So I'll go back to you with another question. What you have to do is look at so Buddha says everything has causes, okay? So even your decision, I will bash my hand with a hammer. That decision has to have causes. Are you Dimitri or Vladimir? I forget. Which one?
Dimitri.
So what are the causes of that decision? What was the thing that happened before that caused it? Because you see, everything doesn't come out of the blue. Everything has a cause. Everything has a cause. So what was the cause of that decision? Can you give any examples of a cause of that decision? And I'm talking a cause meaning in your mind, Dimitri.
Yeah, so this is the battle in my head.
So I'm asking you the question, what are the causes of that decision? Because everything can't come out of nothing. Everything, basically putting it in the Buddhist view, everything that arises, a thought, a thing, anything, you have to point to a previous something. And then with that previous something, that has to come from a previous something. There's an evolution of causes. Nothing can come out of the blue. Nothing can come in isolation. So there was a cause for that decision. Give me an example what you think the cause might be. Not even thinking about karma. Tell me what you think the cause would have been for that decision.
I don't know, probably if someone who would do it, maybe he wanted to hurt himself by doing this.
Good. Okay. So you've got to look at the causes of that. So this is the whole point. You're answering your own question. Everything is dependent arising. Everything comes from something before. This is the whole principle of cause and effect. And the Buddha's saying you can find nothing that doesn't have a previous cause or many series of causes. So that is the immediate answer to the question. But for whatever reason, when we hear in our modern culture about this law of cause and effect, that there were previous things that we did that caused us to do this present thing, we immediately assume it denies the fact that we've got the options to make choices. But there's no contradiction. In fact, karma reinforces the fact that we can make decisions, but every decision is contingent upon a previous thing. So in other words, you can decide any day you like, Dimitri, to play music, but you have to have that won't arise in your mind if you're tone deaf. If you're born in this life by being tone deaf, it'll never arise in your mind to want to play music. If you know, everybody, you can say, well, everybody's got the decision, the free will to say, I will kill. You're not true. It's just not true. If you don't have a tendency to play piano, it won't arise in your mind to play piano. If you don't have a tendency to kill, it won't arise in your mind to kill. If you don't have a tendency to be generous, it won't arise in your mind to be generous. Well, everything is contingent like that. This thing you decide now comes from a whole series of previous causes. And yesterday's decision came from a previous series of causes, and so on and back and back and back.
Okay, got it.
Are we communicating?
Thank you.
Good. Okay, good. Thank you so much. Very good point. And we all ask it. It's time to go home now. 4 minutes to go for the end.
Yes. We don't have any question at the moment in the chat.
What I want to do is do 4 minutes of what's called Mahamudra, and we'll go into this next time. We'll talk about what it is. So Mahamudra is really it's the two modes of meditation that we learn about in Lam Rim: concentration and insight. But the point here is in Mahamudra, the first one is concentration, just like we learn. But the object is not a visualization. It is not the breath. It is not a concept. The object of meditation in Mahamudra is the mind itself. In other words, just to sit here, be very relaxed, just close your eyes, be very relaxed, very natural. And for 3 quality minutes, we've got 3 minutes, for 3 quality minutes, make a strong determination. I'm going to pay attention to my thoughts. Now, the point is, normally we get completely involved in our thoughts. We're shouting and yelling at ourselves all the time. But here we're developing the skill, just like you would if you were watching the breath. But here the object isn't the breath. It's actually the thoughts themselves. So this is demanding that we just pay attention. That's the part of our mind that's doing the job, attention. We're going to pay attention to whatever arises in your mind. You don't force thoughts to come. You don't wonder where they are. You don't have discussion with them. You don't criticize them. You don't wish they weren't there. You simply observe the thoughts. No opinions, no analysis. You just pay attention to your thoughts. That's it, with strong determination. to stay sharp and focused. Just let the thoughts come and go. Just one more minute, one quality minute. Just observe your thoughts. Pay attention. So relax now. There's about 3 minutes. And it's far better for 3 quality minutes than 20 minutes spacing out, I promise. Because concentration really demands discipline and clarity and alertness. You can't just space out. This is not a relaxation technique. So that's just a start. And maybe we'll discuss this as we go along the next few weeks. I'll quote from Lam Rim and talk about the marvelous potential our mind has, just to make us a bit optimistic. Because if you keep hearing about transforming problems, it's like having, I'm going to swear here, it's like having hands in your own shit. It's quite difficult. So it's nice to get a bit light and spacious, okay? All right, sweethearts. Thank you so much, everybody, for a lovely conversation with all of you. We think whatever we've heard, all these seeds we've planted, nothing goes astray. In Buddhism, nothing goes astray. Everything gets stored in our mind, which is very encouraging. So we think all these seeds we've planted, maybe nourish them from this second forward with our practice, with our effort to develop our amazing potentials so we can help others. That's the idea. Jang Chub, Sem Chub, Rinpoche, Ma Ke, Panam, Ke Gyuchi, Ke Panyam Pa, Me Payang, Gong Ne, Gondu, Pelva Sho. That's it. Thank you, Nina.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.
Okay. See you next week then.
See you next week.
Well, thank you, darling.
See you next
Much
week.
love.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.